Dune by Frank Herbert. It's an epic novel from 1965. Is it a sci-fi epic or a prophetic warning? What does it all mean? So we're getting into the themes and meanings behind Dune today. It is a layered work with political, philosophical, religious, and other ideas, and it's relevant to some current issues and maybe a little less relevant to some issues that have already run their course in society. But let's talk about the big ideas. First, religion as control. So if you're not familiar with Dune, there'll be slight spoilers here. It's a fantastic book. You'll definitely enjoy it, worth the read. But there's a religion on the planet Arrakis, which has been set up by the Bene Gesserit, which is specifically to produce an outcome that they want, to kind of control the masses. And you can think of, was it Stalin who said the religion is the opiate of the masses, or was that Lenin? Anyway, there have been various atheistic leaders over time who have characterized religion as being as being an opiate for the masses. And Dune does take a little bit that role. You can see it as a little more nuanced than that, because the characters who are religious don't hate it and aren't necessarily harmed by it, but overall it's viewed as a tool for manipulation. And that theme doesn't land really well today, maybe because we're so used to pop culture and news media criticizing religion or treating it this way. Back in 1965, the idea might have been a little more fresh, and it might have felt a little more relevant because there have been various religious aspects to World War II and some subsequent conflicts. But in the book, you can see this in a number of ways. So the Bene Gesserit, they're what they call the Missionaria Protectiva, is the idea that they've created myths across the galaxy to make cultures behave the way they want them to behave. And Paul Atreides, who's the hero, the main character and protagonist, realizes that this is happening. And he says, there's a quote where he says, "I am a seed, the rights are not mine, they're Bene Gesserit, but the people will believe in them anyway." You can see this if you've seen the recent movie. If you haven't read the book, but you have seen the Villeneuve movie that came out in 2021, and I think the sequel is 2024. I'm approximate on those years. They kind of get this part right. It's pretty faithful to the book. So in the novel, though, like I said, there's a little nuance. Religion is both sincere and a tool. Paul knows he isn't the Messiah, which he's being set up to be, but he still steps into the role, and there are times when he seems to believe it, or at least he really goes with it in a strong way. So questions you could ask yourself today that would be relevant: when do leaders begin to believe their own myth? Political leaders seem to adopt the idea even today that there's some sort of religious aspect to their leadership, something to watch for. But like I say, that's a theme that's maybe a little less timely than it used to be. Theme number 2 for us is ecology and survival. So environmentalism. Again, 1965 would put you on the early end of the big environmental movement that we've all lived through. Now it feels like it's waning just a little bit. I mean, we all care about the environment as much as we ever did, but it's less of a social cause than in the past. Still, the book hits hard on it. So Arrakis is the desert planet that could be made green, but is just sand dunes and lacks water now. And so you could see it as an economic or an ecological disaster. The in the book, there's one character's vision. He says the highest function of ecology is the understanding of consequences. So there is kind of this idea of stewardship and taking care of natural resources, and that's something that's been done wrong by the corrupt people in the book. Arrakis also could be seen as a metaphor because it's been exploited. In the movie, one thing they do that's nice is the ships that come to extract resources actually look like insects. They actually look like parasites. But definitely in the book, it's clear that the House Atreides and the Harkonnens are there to exploit resources, and the planet is just being eaten up by them. It is, if you'll recall, Arrakis, a very harsh planet, and the resource is spice that they pull out of the sand. You can see spice is basically similar to oil. It's just like we extract oil from, say, Middle Eastern countries. Here it's spice. Obviously, oil comes from many other countries too. So the Fremen, though, the Bedouin people who live there, they have this kind of ecological fantasy, this dream that the planet will one day become green, that they'll find the water and they'll save the planet. So that's kind of an ecological theme. You can see it does resonate a bit, but like I say, maybe not as fresh as it once was. So here's an idea that seems very fresh and persistent to me. One of the themes is manufacturing heroes. So in some ways, Paul Atreides is not a traditional hero. He's kind of put in a position that he doesn't want to be in, and he knows that it's all mythology and he's not really a hero. But he also has these visions that are kind of like this heroic prophetic thing going on because he's eating the spice. And he sees in advance that there will be a jihad, this big battle, and he can't prevent it. He says that all he can do is try to control it a little bit. So he has to kind of invent himself as a hero. So it makes the argument, the book implicitly argues that the heroes are made, the leaders are manufactured. And he says that as he progressed, there's this line at one point where it says, every step he took carried him further from humanity. So this is maybe the alienation of someone who steps into a big leadership role like that. You could see Dune as following the kind of Messiah story arc that many movies and mythologies have, many books have. But you could also see it as completely subverting it, because Paul's rise to be a leader is inevitable. Like, maybe he would stop it, but he can't. It's just something that's been put in motion, and he's a pawn just as much as anyone else. It's still, and yet there's something about it that really resonates. Seeing him becoming a hero or become a leader still feels good in some way. All right, another theme that, again, I think would have been fresher in 1965 than today. And I don't mean to criticize the book at all. Like, I love the book. If you haven't read it, you got to read it. But it does talk about gender issues a little bit. And the real power in Dune is often wielded by female leaders. So the Bene Gesserit, obviously, but in the Fremen tribe also, the female leaders. So you can see the Bene Gesserit as a matriarchy. At one point, they say that, here's a quote, "We exist only to serve the sisterhood's breeding program." So that's one of the men saying that. So the women really are in charge in that regard. Jessica, who's Paul Atreides' mother, is conflicted because she has duty to her family, but also duty to the Bene Gesserit. And so she has competing roles that make her take some interesting perspectives on female leadership. The book, though, is critical of basically all leadership structures, whether they're patriarchal or matriarchal. So the Bene Gesserit aren't portrayed in a 100% positive way either, which is some nice nuance. Frank Herbert does acknowledge that there are trade-offs. Some people will read Dune and say, well, this is 1965 mentality. It's a little bit sexist. But I think the author actually does a really nuanced job of addressing these issues. The women have a lot of influence, but there's a cost to it. They lose some of their agency, end up in these conflicted situations. Another theme that resonates with me, at least, is language as power, the idea that language shapes our reality and our perception of it. So remember, there's this strange supernatural power in the book, which is the voice that Paul's using. He's learning from his mother how to use the voice to control people. And that's kind of, and then also speaking publicly, he becomes this very persuasive orator. And in both cases, it's the power of words. It makes sense that an author, a novelist, would kind of believe in the power of language. But you also see this in many cultural conflicts today. I don't want to get into politics, but often the issues that are being debated loudly really are a debate over semantics and word choice and how we're going to characterize things, rather than a bona fide disagreement of opinions. All right. So, and Herbert, the author, Frank Herbert, also uses kind of made up words. He does a lot of, even the terms I've been using here, like Bene Gesserit and Fremen, you get this vocabulary. I watched the movies, the Villeneuve movies, before I read the book. And I just thought, okay, finally, I've got to read this book. It's just, why haven't I done that before? If you do that, it really makes it easier, I think, because you already have the vocabulary, so the book is less confusing. There are a lot of characters, too, so it helps with that. All right, so some interesting points about language and controlling information. Another theme is time and destiny and dealing with the future. I don't know how you feel about this. I always feel like I would love to know the entire future. I'd love to know the day and hour that I die, like every future detail of my life if I could, because then you could make better decisions. It would be great. But not everyone feels that way. I find that people are about 50-50. A lot of people really hate that idea. The book, Dune, implicitly makes the argument that knowing the future doesn't free you. It may be more of a trap than a freedom, because at least in this fictional universe, there is a little bit of inevitability to it. And Paul does say he's having these visions, and he emphasized that the future can be shaped. So that's maybe a little bit hopeful. But then a lot of things that happen in the book seem kind of inevitable. Frank Herbert does warn, we're going to get into some technological issues in just a second, but he does warn against techno-determinism a little bit. And you can see in Paul, for various factors, not just technology, but the prophetic background and so on, he becomes kind of a prisoner of what's going to happen. Okay, final theme to talk about, and this is the one that I find super relevant, is artificial intelligence. The background of the story, and this is kind of lost in the movies, unfortunately, but the background of Dune is that all the events are happening after an artificial intelligence event where AI progressed so much that it took over humanity and enslaved them. So the people eventually were able to rebel, and they put in new systems that would kind of take the place of artificial intelligence. So one of them is the Bene Gesserit Witch Order. Another one is the Mendats. Those are the people who are hyper good at doing calculations in their minds. There is a thread through the whole book about human potential, and you see people doing these unusually great things. But the reason the people did these unusually great things was to substitute for artificial intelligence and to protect people from ever creating conscious machines again. So that's the theme that seems to resonate most today, because we're on the brink of artificial general intelligence. People are nervous about it. There are pros and cons. There's also the fact that in any sci-fi book, if you're having future battles on a planet somewhere, you have to deal with the fact of artificial intelligence. Why aren't the computers solving everything? They should be really smart at that point. So anyway, there are a lot of great ideas in Dune. What did I miss? Leave some comments. It's an excellent epic book. I have not read the sequels yet. They change in tone a little bit. I have started reading Dune Messiah, which is the first sequel, but people who have read them all tell me it gets a little bit weird, but I'll probably go ahead with it because the first novel was just so compelling.